the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing over there, Rob? Good. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. How are you? How you doing? Here's a news flash for you. We have to be who we are in this life. We have to work with who we are and what our experiences bring to the table. And for the purposes of this show, what your life experience brings to the table could be the basis of a really good book. But first, you have to find out who you are. And that's what Shelley Stokes does. He's a clinical psychologist who does psychotherapy with adults and couples. He wrote a book with Sharon Lewis, a marriage and family therapist, entitled Letting Go and Taking the Chance to Be Real. And basically, you were telling me this was a manual that you gave out in your workshops that are attended by mental health professionals as well as the general public. And your first question is a whopper. Who are we really?
Yeah, I think what it is finding that voice of the real self, and that experience really is one of when we feel like this is the real me, that isn't often out there, but really feels that kind of congruence. The real self is composed of a lot of different self states. So they're both positive and negative, and they talk to each other and so forth. But it's when that comes together, when you feel like, well, this is the real me that integrates all of that, that's the real self that's positive and affirming. What I've found a lot is that, first of all, many people are not aware of even what the real self sounds like or feels like due to trauma growing up, where they really didn't have much connection, or they were punished when they were, being real and couldn't really express themselves. And a lot of times when we're asked to, like with the interview, we're asked to do various things, we may have anxiety, or we may have, negative voices that come up that say, you're going to sound dumb, you're going to fail, and so forth and so on. When we fight with those kind of voices, they simply get larger. The way I think that gets metabolized is to listen to the voices, to try and hear what they're saying, and then integrate that with other self states, other voices, and that's when the real self comes out. I'll give you one short example of it. I can think when I was a child of my mother saying to me, you can do anything. Now, on the surface, that sounds good, and her intentions were good. But even as a child, I never believed her. I thought it was a fiction because I don't think she believed that. It's a very unrealistic construction. Had she said to me something like, affirm me for what I could do, this was a really good job, and, push me to find my own limits, I think that would have been a lot more helpful. So I carry that kind of voice with me that says, you really can't do anything. And when that voice comes up, I have to realize that was an old script. That was my mother's voice. And it's no longer operable in the present. I can find my own limits, and that's when I start to feel like I'm being myself.
I think we all have those voices. When you're growing up, my mother told me the same thing. You can be anything you want. And I
Right.
believed her. And I went full throttle. And it's like, no, you can't be anything you want. No, you have limitations.
Yes.
Those thoughts can destroy you if you don't learn to figure out what to do with them. And
Absolutely.
it's comforting to me to know that there is such a thing called voices. There is such a thing called learning to control them. And
Yes.
there is such a thing as feeling what's right. I have a feeling.
That's absolutely true. Right, the feeling of authenticity. One of the problems, I guess, with some of the defenses that come up, it's kind of counterintuitive. But, on the other end of the spectrum are people that are very narcissistic, and they have no ability to look inside and to tolerate flaws. And, they can't hear the other voices because they won't allow them. And they actually have a very fragile structure. So they always aggrandize themselves, and they want other people to adore them and so forth, and they're perfect. But it's such a fragile structure because it's such a limited self state, and it doesn't listen to all the other self states, like when we fail and when we have, problems, that those things aren't integrated into a narcissistic structure. So part of that, although it looks really good on the surface, is really not good at all because it's not the real self. It's an artificial self. It's a false self.
Right.
It's really, in a sense, a how-to manual of how to get there and how to get past the defenses and what the process is in finding the real self and what that voice even sounds like. You know, so it's meant to both help the general public in doing that, and also to help clinicians, psychotherapists, in their work.
Well, thank you, Shelley. I think we need all the help we can get. Looking forward to the rest of this series. 3 years in the Marine Corps, 19 in the Army, and a screenwriter at heart. Dale Botten brings us A Pirate's Tale. Nice title you got here. A nice, relaxing sea cruise. What's the story?
Actually, I've always been fascinated with treasures of all kinds. Two things on my bucket list are Oak Island in Nova Scotia and Cocos Island off the coast of Costa Rica. They're both associated with very famous treasures that I used to read about when I was a young kid in high school about 112 years ago.
So what does a quiet substitute teacher from Des Moines do when he inherits a pirate ancestor's old house containing a diary with coded directions to a fabulous treasure?
He embarks on a quest to find himself. James Bartholomew Hudson the third inherits this house from his great-great-great-granddaddy pirate, James Bartholomew Hudson the first. And somewhere there is a diary with coded directions to a fabulous treasure, the treasure of Lima, Peru, which, by the way, is a real treasure. And while he is exploring the house looking for a diary, he runs across a dead body, and this freaks him out on Halloween night. And this freaks him out, and he goes running down the stairs and jumps into his Volkswagen and speeds about 75 miles an hour through a 45-mile speed zone and gets arrested. And the cop takes him back there, and he says, "Yeah, but I saw a dead body. I saw it." So they go up into the attic to look for a dead body, and gee, there's a mannequin with red paint all over its throat. And that night he has a dream wherein he talks to his great-great-great-grandfather, James Bartholomew Hudson I, who is stuck in eternal purgatory because he became a pirate and stole a cross from a church near Lima, Peru. And for that, he was cursed. And he cannot be released from purgatory until that cross is returned to the church. And James I embarks on this quest, not only to find the treasure, but also to set his great-great-grandfather's soul free.
Nice.
Wow.
I mean, that makes me want to read this book. Money, love, passion, and murder are spiced up with seagoing adventure. I love it. Ancient Incas, poison darts, a new lust for life. Welcome aboard, he says. I love your little blurb, Dale. All right, so...
Actually, I started out in film writing screenplays, and a lot of screenplays are adapted from books, and I didn't see any books I wanted to adapt. So I said, okay, I'll write a book.
There you go.
Yeah.
Tell me that you're doing book signings because you'd be so much fun to see in person reading this book.
Oh, yes, definitely. I have that in the works.
All right, Dale. Well, let me know how you make out. Amy Baden Horner is a mom who loves to travel, and hence the name of her book, Memoirs of a Traveling Mama. You liked to write as a kid, right? And even wrote a book when you were just 13 years old. What happened with that?
Like they wanted $5,000 or something to do it, and I didn't have it, of course. But yeah, it's something I've wanted to do my whole life, so here it is.
Okay, so what finally moved you to get it done?
I think the realization, I'm not getting any younger, and it's something I've always wanted to do, and I've had all these writings throughout the years, and I just felt like it was something just spurred me on. My dad died 11 years ago of cancer, and I think ever since that happened, I've just really tried to make things happen. It's the whole seize the day kind of thing. It kind of almost become like a mortality meter for me in a way. Like it's a reminder that you just have to live today because, every day, every moment's a gift, and you just don't know when it's going to end. So There's a long answer to your question, I guess.
Well-
I definitely...
Is that what inspired you to travel?
No, I mean, we always traveled when I was a kid, everywhere, domestically. We didn't do much internationally, but domestically we did. And I think it began then because we just had such wonderful trips and times together, and I realized how strong, the bonding process was. Travel, to me, it makes me really feel alive and it makes me appreciate what I have to come home to, but also to see there really is life out there. There's life outside of our walls in the house here in my everyday life with the kids and work. And I don't know what I would do if I couldn't travel.
So when did you start taking notes on your travels, or did you just start looking back?
Probably 6 to 8 years ago. The first chapter is probably close to the first time I really began taking, really good notes. Like at the end of each day, when we'd stop for the day, and I would just write, because one, I love to write, and two, I wanted to memorialize it. And at the time, I thought it was just going to be something I would look back on and read, or maybe my husband, I'd, fill him in on what the day was like or whatever. But as I went along and I kept reading and rereading these things, I thought, this is kind of cool. And to maybe inform other people about my trip and, just give an idea of what happened, I think, is eye-opening. But the trips are one, but then the time spent with my family in Ohio, which they're a huge part of not only the book, but me. I mean, my family back there I am what I am because of them. And so I couldn't have written the book without any of them.
What other trips? Where else did you go?
Scotland with my mom.
So these trips weren't with your kids and your husband. They were with a variety of people.
A variety of people, yes. My mom has been involved almost in everything because she's really like my best friend. So she's involved in all aspects, probably of every chapter in the book. And she and I have traveled together almost every time I go anywhere. But yeah, so it's either my mom and me, or I think one chapter is my husband and I, and then a lot of them are involving the kids.
So it's not a book like we went here, we did this, we saw that. It's more of the emotional experience.
It's both. It's what we saw. I definitely detail where we went, what we did, what we saw, but mixed in there are definitely my thoughts, my emotions, my opinions.
Yeah. What do you do for a living?
Technically, I'm a nutritionist. I mean, my life, quite honestly, is being a mama. I mean, I know that sounds cliche, but that's what I do, and that's my priority, and the rest of it really comes second. So,
how old are your kids?
Well, I have 3. They range from 3 years old to 14 is my middle girl, and then 17 now.
So when do you write? When they're asleep?
Right. Yes, primarily, like in the, cracks and crevices of night when I'm waiting for the 17-year-old to get home, or in the morning at 5 a.m. when I wake up early and can't sleep. And
oh, I feel you on that, Amy. That is, I have to tell you, for me anyway, it's the most creative time of the day. You keep traveling and keep writing. You know what the music tells us? That it's time to take a quick break, but we're coming right back. See you on the other side. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books, and unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them, and they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. for your free author submission kit. Call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
And we're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Miss Goldie has a story you will not believe about a fireman who ruined her trust not only in him, but in people in general. The name of her book is Kidnapped by a Fireman.
Well, it happened back in the 80s. A fireman, Atlanta's fireman that all the kids knew. We all trusted him. So me and my best friend, 16, 15 years old, coming back from the grocery store, and he asked us, did we want to ride? So I said, sure. At the time, the Wayne Williams thing was going on, the missing and murdered children. So we was already leery. Our mom had us in karate class, and, all the kids was frightened. Yeah, he was the serial killer here in Atlanta.
And he was murdering children, and they couldn't stop him, and it was crazy.
Yes, they had, he was saying he didn't do it and all that. Well, the fireman kidnapped me and my best friend at that time when it happened. And he looked just like Wayne Williams. And he drove the car, beige car and everything, And so when we seen the fireman yesterday, did we want to ride? We said, sure. Been knowing him for years because he was fireman by the Atlanta Zoo. So when we go by the zoo, we always see the fireman. So when we got in the car, we said we stayed 2 blocks up. At the time, I was visiting my uncle. Instead of going 2 blocks up, he went the other way. Said he picked up a guy, and he said, I'm going to kill you guys. He just said right off the rip, I'm going to kill y'all, and hit the expressway. And when he hit that expressway, my best friend, she jumped out right on the expressway and left me in the car. I was left in the car, and I didn't think about he had the gun or nothing. I was just trying to see how I can jump out. At that time, he pulled over in the far left lane, but make a long story short, I was raped and beaten, and when they decide, I guess God woke me up because I was unconscious. When I woke up looking at them using the bathroom on the side of the road. And when they were using the bathroom, I just locked them doors, and I didn't know how to drive, but I knew D was for drive. God helped me. He woke me up out of consciousness. I climbed over that seat. I put the car in drive, and I drove. They ran up to the car, tried to bust the windows, and they couldn't. At the time, I guess he had families that work at Atlanta Police Department, and they sent a guy that I knew to bribe me. My book tell you about they tried to bribe me to drop the charges, and I wouldn't. I refused. I had to go to grand jury in Fulton County, and then I had to go to grand jury in Clayton County. My siblings, they never knew until I wrote this book. They never knew. I kept it in that long. And after a while, they told us we didn't have to come back to the grand jury no more, and we never knew what happened to the guys. So I asked my uncle, what happened to the guys? He said, well, they just told us we don't have to come back to the grand jury anymore. So, as growing up, I figured they must have took some kind of plea bargain, as
so
growing up.
You don't know if they went to jail?
I never knew.
Oh, man. Are you doing book signings?
Yes, I'm having my book release parties on Gresham Road here in Atlanta.
Okay.
And I got a lot of people coming out. I also have an interview with Lebanon Alive. I got to take them my book for them to read, and they probably set up an interview.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good
I've
one.
written 5 books about my life, and they all true stories. None of my books are no, they are not fake. They all true. People might not believe them, but I have proof of them.
Well, I believe you, Miss Goldie. I do. You have a life that reads like a movie script, and I hope you keep writing. I can't wait to hear more. Francis Ursita has been writing stories for years, and finally he got the nerve to publish one. It's called Kitty Tales. What was the inspiration, Frank?
I'm not getting any younger, and I wanted to share this with the public, especially the sonnets I wrote for my late grandson.
You were inspired by your grandson?
The stories I provided in the book, I have written for family and friends' children, and I decided to do the sonnet after my grandson passed away in 2015 as a tribute to him. And naturally, I showed what I had written to my daughter, and she approved of it. And then I made mention of trying to do this in a book format. So I provided her with a copy of it when it first came out. and she was very pleased with what it looked like with the way they did it.
Well, you describe, follow a magic pencil's assignment to help a sloppy student writer gain self-confidence. Root for a superhero with a magic sword called to save a town from a growing monster. Sing along with an outer space piano that gives a young player the key for self-achievement. Is that the one for your grandson?
No, the sonnet, it's called Memories and Moments with Austin Hines. It's a sonnet that I wrote in mentioning some things that we did over the years together.
What happened?
He accidentally drowned when he was 15.
Oh.
Him and his buddy were fooling around like I did at that age, and they were trying to swing on a grapevine across a Connequanesset Creek, and he had big feet. I used to tease him about that, and he would just laugh and say, "Pappy, Fran, I know." And unfortunately, he slipped on a rock and hit another rock and knocked himself out and went straight down. But they were fortunate to recover him within an hour. So at the viewing, you couldn't really tell anything other than a scratch on his forehead.
That's so sad.
Yeah, he would have been 18 last week on the 17th. But unfortunately, we have little control over circumstances like that. And I'm just fortunate enough that if people read the book, and they'll get a sense of his name and some of the things we did through the sonnet.
So you go from, a story about a pencil.
Yeah, let me explain to you. What I did initially, the 3 short stories were written specifically for a child in mind, like the Magic Pencil book had written for my daughter when she was in 2nd grade because she was a sloppy writer. And I would read it to her all the time. And after she read it in the book, she remembered it. She had, she'll be 37 coming up here next month. And after she read it in the book, it jarred a memory in her of me reading it to her. So she acquired self-improvement through that story. And then the one for Far Out Tunes, I had a neighbor when I was living in Virginia that was a music piano teacher. And her daughter was the same age as my daughter at the time. And I wrote that story for her. And then the one for Termite Invasion into Timbertown was written for 2 nephews of mine at the time when action heroes with swords was popular. And actually the one nephew, he's an adult now with 2 little children, and he reads it to his children all the time when I gave him a copy of the book. There's 3 short children's stories, and that's a sonnet that I wrote, my personal tribute to my grandson, Austin.
Nice. This is going to mean a lot to your family, not just now, but down the road. When Richard Symes had his kids, he noticed they copied everything he did, kind of like monkeys do with humans. And that's what inspired his book entitled Monkey Do, Life is an Open Book. Richard.
Yeah, monkey see, monkey do. Actually, I do comic strips. And a friend of mine told me to put it into a book.
Where do you do comic strips?
It's on my blog. Every month I put something up.
Is it all Monkey Do?
No, it has a lot of drawings on there. I have a lot of drawings. But the Monkey Do, I just put it on there to get it out there because I was trying to get it on a Tampa newspaper comic strip. But they told me it was too many colors and I needed to simplify it. So I just put it on my web and did it that way.
Does it get any attention?
Yes, and that's what motivated me to do it. And I put it on my Facebook, and everybody's like, I like it, it's nice, I like the art. And then, like I said, my friend told me, why don't you put that in a book and push it? Maybe one day I can do a cartoon out of it or something. I'm like, good idea.
So what's the story about?
It's mainly about my 2 sons, my kids. Every now and then my father will come visit, and then I'll watch them, and I'll just write it down, whatever happened, But it's mainly about my kids, and that's my idea, the motivation. I just write about them.
But instead of kids, they're monkeys.
Yeah, because I was reading up on some monkeys at the time, and orangutan. I think they're orangutans. They're very similar to human as far as smart. So it's basically orangutans copied humans. But they're doing things that my kids would do. So they're taking the life of my children. I guess the end is when I die, or, I'm too old to write anymore.
You're going to write a sequel to this book. This is part of a series.
Yes, it's part of this. I just wrote this first one just to get my feet wet in the business, see what the business is like. But I have more books. I just haven't put them out.
You have books already written.
Yeah, I have a few more just sitting down. I haven't published it or nothing.
All right, Richard. Well, I hope you can get all your books out there one of these days, sooner or later. You got to be patient sometimes. And you really need to keep up with the Page Publishing Book Club. I mean it. I love it when I meet authors and they tell me they were teetering on the verge of either writing a book or getting a book published that they already wrote. And when they listened to our show, they were inspired. And you know what a lot of people say? Not everybody, but a lot of people. If that guy can do it, so can I. And it's true. Just get the author submission kit, just do that much and see what happens. It doesn't cost you anything. You never know, right, Rob? You just never know. Look at us. Who thought that you and I would be sitting here recording the Page Publishing Book Club, huh? And here we are. And there you are. And that wraps up another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Don't forget, you can always download any show you want, any time you want, and listen as much as you want at 710WOR.com. In the meantime, enjoy whatever you're doing and think about doing one more thing, writing that book. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. See you next time.